Hello and welcome back to my bookshelf door part 3. In part 1 we went over all the comic books, graphic novels, manga, and kind of like coffee table books such as like lore books and world books that I owned. In part 2 we looked at every single novel I had up on my bookshelves, and with part 3 we are now going to be looking at digital books and ebooks and also, like any digital comics I own. Spoiler, it's not a lot, but in fact, it's one title, but we will be going over it and why I own it. And also, I want to just get this out of the way as well. It's all Amazon, or it's almost all Amazon, and I'm not cool with that because I'm really not cool with how Amazon have been treating publishers lately, and, you know, delving into AI generated stories and stuff and promoting them and all that stuff. So I have not bought a digital book in a while, but when I do, it's not going to be on Kindle. Or if it's an audiobook, it's not going to be on Audible, because we are also going to be looking at audiobooks as well. But for now, this is where all my stuff is, and I want to show you my stuff. So let's look at the stuff. Also worth noting, I don't technically own any of this anymore because Kindle changed how that works, so that's cool. But I won't go on a tirade. Let's just look at the actual books themselves. I'll go over each and every one and why I got it and what I think about it, and if I even remember it. I guess for context, it's worth noting back in the early 2010s, I got a Kindle for my birthday. This was before they were like normal tablets. This was, I think they've got a specific name now. Is it like Kindle Paperwhite or something? Basically, an e-reader. That's what I got. And I was looking at the store and I saw some free books. So there's some random free books down here that I do not remember anything about. Something by Ted Stetson. Cool. Hostile Witness by Rebecca Forster. Never heard of it. The Weight of Blood by David Dalgish. Never heard of it. Awakened His Eyes. The Awakened Book 1. Never heard of it. Call of the Herald. You something. Oh, Young Adult Epic Fantasy, The Dawning of Power Trilogy, Book 1. No familiarity with it. Those are all they were free on Kindle, and I grabbed them, books. So the first real book that we're going to talk about today is The Hunger Games: Catching Fire, which is the second book in a free book series, which is interesting. Why do I own the second book in a free book series? Well, I think I borrowed the first book from my sister, and I liked it. And I thought, I'm not going to buy the first book for myself because I've already read it. I'll just go ahead and buy the second book on my Kindle. And then I think I do have the third book physically somewhere. So that's not ideal. In general, I try not to mix and match when it comes to like formats of a particular book. But yeah, The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. I randomly own the middle book in that trilogy, and it's been so long since I read it. I enjoyed it at the time, that's all I can really tell you. Okay, up next is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'm trying to remember if I honestly owned this long ago enough that I was using this as helping me in school and stuff when we were studying it. I don't think so, though. I remember a lot of these like classic books. Oh no, I said classic 3 times. But you could get them for free. There were like free publication versions of them as ebooks. I don't know if that's still the case, but it was back then. Up next, we've got Zombie by Darren Shan, which if you watched my previous video about my physical books, you will not be surprised to see Darren Shan here. However, you may be surprised to see I didn't continue the Zombie series. I read this book in its entirety, and there is something about the diction of this book which is just different to the previous Darren Shan titles, and it just didn't hook me. It might not have helped that I thought I knew the twist at the end, based on like a hint someone had given somewhere, and it turned out that I had the entirely wrong idea, and so therefore I spent this entire book anticipating a twist which never happened, or which was completely different. It is a fun twist, and I am really glad it was done, but yeah, maybe I need to give this a reread and a second try, but the Zombie series passed me by, I'm sad to say. Up next is The Husband by Dean Koontz. In the previous video where we discussed physical books, I talked about how for a hot minute it looked like I might be into thrillers. That's because I borrowed a lot of my dad's Dean Koontz books and read through them all. Off the top of my head, I want to say The Taking, oh god, One Door Away from Heaven, Velocity. I remember really enjoying Velocity. From the Corner of His Eye, I remember enjoying that one a lot as well. But Husband, I didn't get very far through this book. I got a couple of chapters in, it didn't do much for me, and I stopped. Up next, another classic, The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. I was very intrigued to see if I would enjoy this the same way I enjoyed the Stephen Moffat show. Shocker, it's very different, it's very stuffy, and I did not enjoy The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. I did not get very far through them. However, looking at Frankenstein and Sherlock Holmes, I feel like I want to go back and try the classics again, because I'm older now, my tastes have matured a bit, I've read some quote-unquote stuffier fiction, and so I might give this another go. Up next is, you've been waiting for me to talk about this, I'm sure, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. We've got a Game of Thrones, we've got a Clash of Kings, we've got a Storm of Swords, we've got a Feast for Crows, and we've got a Dance with Dragons Part 1 and 2. I don't know why they split this into Part 1 and 2, but not this into Part 1 and 2, but they did. And yeah, this is how I read A Song of Ice and Fire, and I love this series so much. I love this series so much, and I think it is so tragic that all discussion about this series is so wrapped up in whether it will ever be finished and how long it is taking for Winds of Winter to come out and how bad the show ended, that nobody talks about the books themselves anymore, or the series itself anymore, at least not that I've seen on BookTube. And I don't want to talk about all that faff. I want to talk about the fact that this is one of the best fantasy series you will ever read, which is not a hot take. But I guess what might be a hot take is, who cares if the last 2 books come out? You should read the first 5, because they have informed so much of my taste in terms of what I want from fiction, what I want from fantasy, and I guess the way I view the world in some ways as well. And it's not got an ending, and it's not fine. I want the ending, but it is what it is, and I don't regret reading the first 5 books just because the last 2 aren't out. You know what I'm saying? What I do regret reading, though, is A Plague of Angels by John Patrick Kennedy. You might never have heard of this book. This book, I have no idea how I came across it, or why I found it, or, well, I kind of know why I decided to buy it, but this book is... Okay, I decided to buy this book because I love Diablo 3, and Diablo 3 uses Christianity, I guess. I was going to say Christian myth, but that's probably offensive, so I won't say that. But, like the whole heaven and hell thing, and it weaves it into like this dark fantasy world in a way that's really cool, and I was hoping that Plague of Angels would be the same thing. Plague of Angels, I don't know if it's officially labelled as such, but it's basically erotica, and I'm not into erotica. No shame if you are, but I'm just not. And I remember reading this book and just getting very nonplussed about the fact that every 5 minutes we were having very, very detailed scenes of that variety, which, thou dost not speak those words on YouTube, lest YouTube banish thy video to the plains of hell itself. But yes, Plague of Angels, maybe it's a good book for people who are into that kind of thing. I did not know what I was getting myself into, and I wanted something more plot-driven and less between-the-legs-driven, if you know what I mean. It very much feels like a book where... I never thought I'd be talking about this book anywhere, by the way. This was so long ago. This was over a decade ago that I started to read this and gave up on it, but... This book just disappointed me. That's all I gotta say about it, really. Up next is a book called Angel Stations by Gary Gibson. And I believe Gary Gibson is a pretty well-known science fiction author. I think he's well regarded, unless there's another Gibson that I'm thinking of. I remember reading the blurb to this book and being interested and excited about it, but it is unfortunately a book that I have yet to read. It was probably £1. Most of the books that I just pick up on a whim, I do so because they're £1. That's something I forgot to mention about A Song of Ice and Fire, by the way. Each of these books was £1 when I got it, which is still insane to me. But this was during the early Kindle boom, when they were realizing that putting a book on sale for £1 would sell millions and be easy money, so that's probably why they did that. I doubt they've done that for a while now, but yeah, I got every book in A Song of Ice and Fire for £1, which is wild to me. But yeah, sorry, I was talking about a different book. I just have not read this book. Let me know if it's any good, if you've read it. Let me know in the comments. Up next, we've got The Hobbit. The good old Hobbit, which I have read and enjoyed. I can't remember if I read the ebook version all the way through, but I have definitely listened to the audiobook version all the way through. I'm pretty sure I have read the ebook version all the way through though. That's an interesting one. But yeah, it's The Hobbit. I don't need to tell you about The Hobbit. You know what The Hobbit is. It's the bloody Hobbit. I do like this cover, or this version of the cover. I like this art style in general. These are the covers that I saw being kind of sold throughout my childhood in Waterstones. So there's that. My Mother Was an Upright Piano is a short story collection by an author called Tanya Hirschman, which I have not read, but I did pick up because she came to my university course for a guest lecture, because I did a creative writing course, and I have a creative writing degree, and I didn't consider that I would be talking about that in this video because I forgot that I had this. But yes, short story collection by Tanya Hirschman. Great author. I mean, okay, great person. I've not read her, unfortunately, but she was very lovely, and very informative and all that good stuff. But that was a while ago now, so I don't really remember. Again, we're still in like the early 2010s around here. But yes, up next is the first franchise fiction book and the first WoW novel I ever bought, World of Warcraft: Warcrimes by Christie Golden. This is the Warlords of Draenor tie-in. So anyone who knows World of Warcraft, one of the expansions is called Warlords of Draenor. What they've been doing for a while now is, before an expansion comes out, a prequel novel tie-in will come out, and it will have varying levels of importance to the lore. Warcrimes is shunned by the community for being far too important, to the point where if you play through all of the Mists of Pandaria story, which is the expansion before it, and then jump straight into Warlords of Draenor, you won't know what's happening, or why we are where we are, or how we got there, because all of that is within this book. However, Warcrimes itself, it's a pretty good book. I'm never going to say a World of Warcraft book is like top shelf fiction or anything like that. But I do like franchise fiction as an extension of a universe from another medium, and Christie Golden is the master of World of Warcraft fiction, as I will point out when we get to some of those later books. Next up, let's just do these three classic books all in order. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, Grimm's Fairy Stories by Jacob Grimm, and The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I haven't read these. That's all I've got to say about them. I just picked them up because they were free, and I guess if I ever want to read them, there they are. However, nestled between these classics is Douglas Adams' Complete Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the trilogy of 5, and I'm happy to report I've read all 5 of these books all the way through, and they are a delight. They're very funny. It's been, again, a long time, so I don't remember a lot of the details, but yes, the trilogy of 5, because it was meant to be a trilogy and it ended up being 5 books. I think, if I remember right, the 4th book was a bit of a departure and was quite romantic, but I think the 5th book went back to kind of business as usual. But yes, this, if you've never read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and you have any enjoyment of science fiction or fun, you gotta go read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's incredible stuff. It's just incredible stuff. Next up is The Evil and the Pure by Darren Dash. I have not read this book, but if you think that name sounds similar to one we saw before, Darren Dash is Darren Shan's kind of adult brand. So this is not a book for teenagers. This is a book for adults. And because I'm a fan of Darren Shan, even if I didn't make the actual time to read the book yet, I made sure to go and pick it up to support that man. Up next is Stealer of Flesh by William King. And I'm a little bit confused as to why it's so far down on the list, because I remember the reason I got this was because I wanted to see... In fact, maybe I picked this up just because the book was announced. There was a World of Warcraft tie-in novel, which we'll see as we scroll further up, but it was written by William King, and I wanted to see what William King was like as a writer. I've only read the first chapter to this. I only remembered owning the sample to this book, so I'm surprised that I own the entire book. I'm sure it was super cheap again. But yes, Stealer of Flesh, Cormac, book 1. This is... Let me know if you've ever heard of this book, because I've never heard of anyone talking about this book. But it is written by someone who wrote a book that I liked very much later down the line. And then we've got a wall of World of Warcraft books. So I'll try and keep this brief for the people who don't give a shit about World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft Thrall, Twilight of the Aspects was a pre-Cataclysm tie-in novel, I believe, at least, as was The Shattering. I mean, that one is called Prelude to Cataclysm, so that one is more directly the pre-Cataclysm tie-in novel. This one takes place around the same time, I believe. But it's more about the character of Thrall and his journey. I think in this book, like, he leaves to go sort some stuff out, and in this book, like, he's sorting that stuff out. I don't know, it's been such a long time since I read these books again. But yeah, it is... I remember enjoying both of them. Then there's Stormrage by Richard A. Knack, who is probably the second most prolific World of Warcraft book writer, and also does a good job, though I do tend to prefer Christie Golden. But, you know, preferences be preferences. Stormrage, I think, also takes place around this... I think all of these books take place around the Cataclysm time period, which is wild. I think they just did lots of books around this time. But Stormrage... If you have ever played World of Warcraft Legion and you've played through the Val'sharah zone, it is basically the Stormrage novel recycled. In this book, Xavius comes back, corrupts the Emerald Dream into the Emerald Nightmare, and Malfurion and our heroes have to run off and try and save it, which is pretty much what happens in Val'sharah. I do remember they canonized Hearthstone teleportation in this book as well, which was pretty fun. Wolfheart, again around the same time period. I believe, obviously, this is more to do with Varian Rin. Actually, you know what? I straight up don't remember what this book is about beyond that, because maybe I'm conflating these two books, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. Scratch that, it's coming back to me now. In this book, we see a lot about the relationship between Varian Rin and his son, his very peace idealistic son, and how warmongering Varian Rin deals with that, and we see stuff about him accepting the Worgen into the Alliance, and stuff about him dealing with the dwarves and their potential civil war happening, and I think the Cataclysm was also happening around this time, so yeah, it was a good book. However, what I do remember is World of Warcraft Arthas, which is... such a good book. Honestly, out of every World of Warcraft book, Arthas might be the closest to a book that I would recommend to someone who's never played World of Warcraft. If you have the slightest inkling of an interest into the story of the Lich King, if you know anything about that, Arthas Rise of the Lich King tells that story of how a young prince, a young paladin, with everything ahead of him, slowly ends up being corrupted into the Lich King. It's basically the Darth Vader story, but World of Warcraft does kind of borrow a lot from other stories, and it's WoW's own Darth Vader story, but it is much beloved because of how good it is. And Christie Golden did such a fantastic job here. Next up, we're going to escape franchise fiction just for a minute while we discover Brandon Sanderson. That's right, this is when I jumped on the Brando Sando train, and just like most people, I started with the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy, and I'm so glad I did. I reread this series this year, although I did it in audiobook format. Originally, I did it in ebook format, and this was before Mistborn was just called Mistborn. This was when it was called The Final Empire, which in my eyes still makes more sense, and they should change it back. The cowards. But yeah, what is there to say about Mistborn that hasn't been said already? It's such a good fantasy trilogy for people who are looking to break into the genre, because it's not your typical fantasy. It's not high fantasy. It's not like orcs and elves and magic. I mean, it is magic, but it's more like... it's almost more urban fantasy, although it doesn't take place in the real world. It takes place in this fantastical world, which takes place... I mean, the quick pitch for Mistborn is... what would happen if a Dark Lord won? What kind of a world would he make? This is the story set in that kind of a world, right? And the lore, as the series goes on, the lore builds out in such an interesting way. And yeah, I would recommend this trilogy to absolutely anyone. It's fantastic. You should get on it. But then we are diving straight back into franchise fiction. First of all, with the Star Wars Aftermath trilogy, which is, I believe, shortly after Disney bought Star Wars and decanonized all of the existing extended universe stuff. This was some of the first books to come out. This was them going, okay, this is what happens immediately after Return of the Jedi. And I'd always been curious about what happens immediately after Return of the Jedi, and so I went, sure, let's see what the Disney canon stuff is like. And this is a really good trilogy of books. Honestly, it's better than the sequel trilogy of movies. Chuck Wendig is excellent, and yeah, I really enjoyed these books. I also really enjoyed Bloodline by Claudia Gray, which is a book centered around Princess Leia and her kind of role within the New Republic, in the aftermath of the original trilogy, before the events of the sequel trilogy as well. Then I picked up Thrawn by Timothy Zahn, which is, he's very famous for his Thrawn books, and so this was his, I think, Disney canon Thrawn book. I couldn't get into this one, sadly. There's a couple I actually couldn't get into. I also couldn't get into Tarkin by James Luceno. For whatever reason, these two books, they are just... they're impenetrable to me. They're just impenetrable. And that's a shame because I've heard so much good stuff about Thrawn specifically. I might try again someday, or I might just go read the original non-Disney canon books and see if they do anything better. But I'll tell you what is not impenetrable is Phasma, which I'm just now realizing was written by Delilah S. Dawson, who I know for writing a later World of Warcraft tie-in novel, which I'm sure we'll get to. Nope, my apologies, I got her mixed up. She actually did a short story for the World of Warcraft The Voices Within short story collection for the War Within stuff, and it was a good one. It focused on Illyria, but anyway, that's beside the point. But Phasma it's not just a great Star Wars novel, it's a great science fiction novel. It's got some really unique concepts in there, and it makes the character of Phasma so interesting and cool, with like such a unique backstory, that you will be retroactively more angry at the sequel trilogy for not using her better. Up next, I bought the entire Con Iggulden Emperor series for £1 each. I started to realize that I really want to get into historical fiction, and honestly, I'm still at that place in my life. I have not sated my desire to get into this yet, this side of fiction, historical fiction. We will get into some books I have read in the genre later, but yeah, this is set during the time of ancient Rome. Then we've got two books, and I have no idea what they are or how they got here. Smoke and Summons by Charlie N. Holmberg and The Killer Collective by Barry Eisler. If you're looking at these two books and you're looking at the rest of his library and going, these don't look like books that I would read, you're correct. I don't know what they are. I don't know how they got here. I'm guessing they were just completely free on Kindle, and for whatever reason I pressed a button to pick them up. But yeah, there's that. And then there's The Long Earth. I don't know why The Long Mars is all the way down here, but I picked up... It's the first 3 books in this series. We'll just talk about them here, since The Long Mars is all the way down here. Again, I think I got them cheap. But The Long Earth is a series written by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter. And it's got a really interesting and unique premise that I still think about a lot. And that's that people basically figured out how to hop to the parallel universe next door. And what does that do to society when suddenly there is this infinite frontier stretching out in 2 directions, and you can go and just like keep... Because it's like such an easy device to make, you can keep hopping between parallel worlds until you settle on an Earth that you either like, maybe one that's been colonized, or maybe one that has never had a human set foot on it before. And the protagonist is this really quirky protagonist. I can't quite remember like if it's ever mentioned what's going on with him, but basically the further away he is from the prime Earth, I think the better he feels, like the less noise there is in his head. And I'm sure that gets explored in later books, but they basically set out to explore the Long Earth, and you get to see the variations and how sometimes there are just these gaps where there's no Earth at all, because in this universe the Earth didn't form right, or it didn't form here, and then maybe in another Earth it's just a complete water world. But it's not just these really crazy juxtapositions. A lot of the time it's like most of these Earths look the same. And I should mention I've only finished the first novel. I've only read the first novel. But there was also like this, they were kind of foreshadowing the idea of like, well, if humans evolved on this one Earth and it was super, super rare, what if sentient beings evolved on another Earth and we're gonna run into them coming this way kind of thing, and we're gonna clash. So I think that's probably what the Long War and the Long Mars is about. But yeah, sadly I bounced off the Long War, but I did really enjoy the Long Earth, and I honestly might go back to this series and try it again because it was such an interesting, unique premise that was really cool. Anyway, let's go back up to the top right where we belong. World of Warcraft Shadowlands Shadows Rising by Madeline Rue. Yeah, Shadowlands is probably the most maligned World of Warcraft expansion out there, and honestly, I don't remember things of all that much import happening in Shadows Rising, but I do remember that I enjoyed the book and that it was well written, so there is that. Up next we have the first Book of Swords and the second Book of Swords by Fritz Saberhagen. This is interesting because this is a fairly old fantasy book series, which was recommended by Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells on their podcast, so we are getting a lot closer to modern times now. And I read the first Book of Swords and I quite enjoyed it, and I kind of DNF'd the second Book of Swords. Just because while I love the kind of premise of like the gods have forged these magical swords and gifted them to humanity to watch them basically fuck around with them and see what they're going to do with them and how they're going to destroy themselves, there's something about these books which is just missing something that I can't quite put my finger on. It very much feels like, I actually don't know when these books were published, it very much feels like books from maybe the 60s or the 70s, and I think I'm just too used to more modern fiction. If they are published later, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it felt very, like, plot forward, and the characters were just in service of the plot, if you know what I mean. We didn't really explore how people felt, but it has been a while again since I read these books, so I couldn't tell you in detail what bothered me about them, but I think it did take me a while to come to this decision, but I have DNF'd the second Book of Swords. I'm glad I checked it out, though. In the middle of those two, we also have a Darren Dash novel, called Father of the Future. Once again, I've yet to read it, but it is on that infinite TBR. Now here we have a strange one, because this is not one book. This is like 6 books, but it's all in one PDF or whatever file format Kindle uses. But this is The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. I remember I got a good deal on this, and I've read and finished the first 2 books, and I loved them, by the way. I talked about them last year. But I adored these first 2 books, and then the third book, the main character kind of like randomly went north and abandoned everyone we knew, every plot thread we already held, and for a minute I was a little bit confused about why Bernard Cornwell would choose to write that way, and then I remembered it's historical fiction, and he's probably just going, and then we're going to have to see what's happening in the north, because now things happen in the north. Real life does not conform to the standards of a fictional tale. So yeah, halfway through The Lords of the North, I did kind of fall off a little bit, but I have left myself notes so that when I want to get back into this book, I don't have to start from scratch. I can just check my notes and go, that's what was going on. Then, if you watched the previous video in this series, you will know that I own this book physically, but this is the ebook version of it that I owned. Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. Again, I didn't really like this one all that much, or at least not the first few chapters that I got through. It just felt kind of simplistic, the writing. I don't know, it didn't feel like Brandon Sanderson, it felt a little bit different. I've just realised I've been sorting by recent, and that means recent in terms of file opened. I should have been sorting by purchase order, but whatever, we're too far through this now. Dracula should probably belong with the other classics right at the start. But yes, here we have Bram Stoker's Dracula with the least inspired cover you have ever seen, because this was a royalty-free version that someone threw together and published for free. I do want to give this a go at some point, although I might actually try and find a nice edition and order it physically. Up next we have Play Nice, The Rise, Fall and Future of Blizzard Entertainment, which is a rare non-fiction book in my collection. This is really good. It's by Jason Schreier. It's all about the history of Blizzard Entertainment, including, all that scandalous shit that happened and the corruption and how it kind of fell apart, but also how they kind of are continuing to muddle on, and how it's changed and grown and evolved and adapted, and how all is not lost. But yes, it's a really interesting read if you are as into Blizzard games as I am, and it was not full of all of that horrible shit like I was thought it would be. Obviously it's mentioned and referenced, but it's not the entire story, which is nice to know. Up next, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I can tell you I have not read this front to back because I always get stuck before it gets interesting in Fellowship of the Ring. However, I am happy to report I will have more to talk about on that front in the Audible section of the video. Up next, I'm just going to talk about the Sun Eater books in general, because Howling Dark is not the first entry. Empire of Silences, followed by Howling Dark, followed by, let's see if I can remember this all, followed by The Lesser Devil, I believe, followed by Demon in White, followed by Queen Amid Ashes. These are novellas, it's important to say. They're not important to the plot, but they are just fun additions. Anyway, followed by Kingdoms of Death, the most depressing and beautiful book I've ever read. Not ever read, but, in the series. Followed by Dregs of Empire, which I'm currently reading. It's taking me a very long time despite being a very short book. Followed by Ashes of Man, which is the 6th book, which I wasn't sure if I owned yet, so that's good to know. And then the 7th book is coming out next month, and I'm so excited. But yeah, Dregs of Empire, I just want to mention. I've been reading this novella for so long for 2 reasons. Firstly, I've been... on purpose, I've been putting off catching up with Sun Eater because I don't want to leave too long of a gap between Ashes of Man and the final book. So mission successful there. But secondly, because it's... I've talked about this previously. It's a story about a character in captivity, and I think it's really difficult to make stories like that captivating, or at least captivating enough to overcome the just depressing and repetitive nature of the story of someone in captivity, whether, they're a slave or whether they're in prison. It's hard to pull off, in my opinion. Or at least for my sensibilities, I think it is. Heads up, I'm an idiot. Ashes of Man is book 5 and I have read it. I haven't got book 6. Book 6 is Disquiet Gods. I need to get on that shit. But anyway, we're not going to skip over this. I do own the first Dresden Files book because it was on sale for, say it with me, £1. Actually, I did pick this up fairly recently, so I guess they do still do those deep discounts for Kindle books sometimes. It is the last Kindle book I have bought. It's probably the last Kindle book I will ever buy. But yes, the Dresden Files. Or maybe not the last Kindle book I'll ever buy, but the last non-exclusive Kindle book I'll ever buy, let's put it that way. And I've not read this yet, but I know people go crazy for the Dresden Files, and I'm looking forward to checking it out someday because I am really looking forward to getting into some contemporary urban fantasy. I don't know if contemporary is the right word, but you know what I mean. Like stories that are set in our world, in our time, but with a fantastical nature. I think I will probably enjoy the Dresden Files for that. I've heard that Stormfront is not the best book in the series. It does not put its best foot forwards. However, I'm still expecting to enjoy it all the same. Up next we have Illidan by William King, and this book is a problem because whenever I try to remember the name of Illidan's voice actor, Liam O'Brien, all my brain wants to put in front of the name Illidan is William King because of his book written by William King. But yes, this is William King of Stealer of Flesh fame. That's why I checked this book out when I learned that William King was going to be writing Illidan. I think I was like, that's not Christie Golden. I better make sure this is a good writer. But yes, Illidan is a fantastic novel. It recontextualizes the events of the Burning Crusade, the very first World of Warcraft expansion, and it does so because the expansion Legion reintroduced the character of Illidan, and this was the kind of prequel tie-in novel to Legion. And yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant novel. It's nice to know that it's not just Christie Golden who can write a cracking good World of Warcraft book. Then up here we have The Complete Robot by Isaac Asimov, which I think was a mistake. I think it was a mistake because I was really interested in checking out Isaac Asimov's robot universe, but this is a short story collection, and they do all take place in the same universe, but I find it so hard to read a short story collection front to back, because while I have enjoyed the short stories that I've read so far in this collection, there's nothing drawing me back to it, And for whatever reason, that's important to my brain. I need something to draw me back to a book. If I finish a self-contained story, the knowledge that there is a completely new self-contained story waiting for me usually isn't enough to make me go, oh yeah, I should go continue reading The Complete Robot. Instead, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to continue reading this other book. It's kind of an issue. But hey, I should probably continue reading these short stories. I think what I'm going to have to do, though, is just kind of like read the short stories when I feel like it, but I need to start with the first real book in the series, and at some point I want to read all of Isaac Asimov's works, providing I like them enough. I think that'll be a really fun project. Then there's Darth Plagueis, which is the first Star Wars Legends novel I've ever bought, which, if you're not aware, Star Wars Legends is the name of the extended universe continuity that Disney decanonized, that I was talking about earlier. But Darth Plagueis is the story of, Darth Sidious's master. But I got 20-30% of the way through the book, and I just wasn't feeling it, which is probably sacrilege to say because people love this book. And I'm not going to stop checking out Star Wars Legends because of it or anything like that. I might even try and return to this book and continue to get through it. But I just wasn't feeling it. I honestly couldn't put my finger on why. I think, as it turns out, Star Wars books are very hit and miss for me, as we've discovered down here. But yeah, I'm sad to say Darth Plagueis, I was expecting big things, and they just did not land for me. And then finally here we've got a short story anthology collection called Embrace the Blade Drabbles, which is based on Sword Timber. For those of you who don't know, Sword Timber is an artistic initiative in which artists draw swords, like fantasy swords, special, unique-looking swords, as part of like this artistic initiative. I think there's usually a charity drive behind it as well, and a bunch of independent writers came together and went, let's do that, but make a anthology of short stories based around swords instead of artistic works, which I find to be a really compelling idea because there have been so many times when I have seen artwork and just gone, I don't have that talent, or at least I've not tried to foster that talent within myself to be able to draw. But I wonder if there is some way which I can use the talent I do have, which is writing, in a similar fashion. And it's really cool to see people do that. And you've probably not heard of this book because literally someone in a Discord server I'm in mentioned that they have a writing credit on this book. And I said, yeah, I'm going to get that book. It was like super cheap. You should check it out. I've not read it yet. Here's the thing. I can't tell you if it's any good because I haven't read it yet. But I am all for supporting this kind of initiative. And also it is for a charitable cause. Part of the proceeds of every sale go towards helping UNICEF fight famine in Gaza, which is a big deal right now. So yeah, check that out, see if it's something you might enjoy. I didn't anticipate advertising this book today, but you know what? It is an independent book. They need all the eyes they can get on it. But that's not all we've got to talk about today in terms of digital books that I own. I've already mentioned that we're going to talk about Audible, but there's also, bam, okay, that would have been more impressive if it loaded instantly. I own the full graphic novel adaptation of Robert Jordan's The Eye of the World. It's shown as Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time here, but this is something Dynamite Comics did, and they did it, I think it was in around 2010, 2011, and then they didn't pick up to start doing The Great Hunt, Book 2, until the show started coming out a couple years ago, and now that the show has been cancelled, I don't know what the future of this graphic novel series is, but what I can tell you is that The Eye of the World is complete, has been complete for a long time, and I've read about half of this, and it is a really fun adaptation. I don't know that I would recommend reading this over the original novel because you're going to miss out on a lot of Robert Jordan's wonderful prose, and I do think that a lot of the joy of reading a graphic novel adaptation of a book like this is in seeing how it's adapted and in seeing the things that you've been seeing in your mind's eye for so long adapted into artwork. But yeah, I'm really glad I decided to do this. It's really cool. I do kind of wish I got it physically, but it would have been an absolute bitch to import because it would have had a lot of import taxes on it, so I ended up getting it digitally, and I have no regrets. Okay, I made a few lies at the start of this video because I forgot. I forgot that I've been buying stuff from Humble for a while, so real quick, I also own these 4 Warcraft novels through Humble Bundle, and that's Day of the Dragon. These are all written by Richard A. Knack, by the way. Day of the Dragon, which I believe takes place during Warcraft 2 events. and then War of the Ancients, which is some real old lore. And I don't just mean old lore as in like old to the game, but also this is a war that took place like 10,000 years ago, I think, in comparison to the events of the main game. And I'm really glad that I own these because I forgot I owned these and I have come close to buying them before. And it's funny that I've owned these since 2020 because I really do want to read them. But it's not just that, I also bought a Horus Heresy novel bundle and I own the first 15 Horus Heresy books, which might sound like a lot to the uninitiated. However, there's like 60 of these books at least, I'm pretty sure. That might even be lowballing it dramatically. There are so many Horus Heresy books. I have attempted Horus Rising before, and I was enjoying it, but I did kind of bounce off of it pretty quickly. But I would be more than happy to make a concerted effort at reading these, perhaps after I've tried Eisenhorn, which is a book I own, or an omnibus I own physically. But yeah, Humble's a little bit weird with how it formats book files sometimes. Some of these books are like 3 megabytes and then some of them are like 200 megabytes. I have no idea what's going on with that. They look the same. But yes, that also means I lied to you about only having one comic series to tell you about, because I recently bought a Star Trek Humble Bundle in terms of comics. So we've got a bunch of stuff for the original series here down on the left hand side. And then we also have the Kelvin timeline, which is the movie universe. I've never even watched the movies yet because I'm still partway through TNG. We have some TNG comics here. We have some Picard comics. We have some Deep Space Nine comics. We have some Voyager comics. We have some Discovery comics. We have some Lower Decks comics. We have some Strange New Worlds comics. We have some other stuff that I just don't really know what it is. So yeah, we've got all those Star Trek comics to read at some point, which is going to be real fun. We also have, there was a gaming comics bundle at one point I picked up, so we have a bunch of Assassin's Creed comics, which I'm really excited about because I love Assassin's Creed. We have some Dark Souls comics, some Dishonored comics, some Evil Within comics, some Tekken comics, a Warhammer Dawn of War 3 comic, which was part of this. And then also I just happen to have these G.I. Joe comics. I don't know if they came from the same bundle or where they came from. There's also a Warhammer 40k comic duology. And then there's also some World of Warcraft comics here because there was a Warcraft Stories bundle. That's also where I got the novels from that I just showed you. But there is something called the Sunwell Trilogy, which I've never heard of, and I think which would be quite fun to go and check out because we are going to be revisiting the Sunwell soon. And then there's the famous old Warcraft Legends stuff. There's also World of Warcraft comics, which I'd never heard of. And then there's some like mini-series like Curse of a Worgen and Ashbringer and Mage and Death Knight, and some of these aren't actually graphic novels, they're actually manga. So I've just thrown them in here because I'll lose my mind if I make separate spreadsheets for everything. But yes, that's a bunch of World of Warcraft extended media I have yet to go and read. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then I also remembered I picked up a Transformers IDW Comics Humble Bundle at one point. I don't think I did like the highest tier, but I have a friend who's super into this stuff and I was curious to check it out for myself. Obviously, I did not check it out for myself, but I would still like to. And putting it into a spreadsheet with like checkboxes and stuff will help remind me that it exists. But yeah, there's this Devastation book, and then there's 4 volumes of More Than Meets the Eye and 6 volumes of Robots in Disguise. If you are familiar with the IDW Transformers run, you can tell me if it's a good place to start with these or if I should probably start somewhere else. But yes, I would like to get into some Transformers comics. I really know nothing about Transformers, so that's what we're working with here. And then I have no idea what these are. I have a book called Underwear. I don't know what that's about. And then Wasteland Volume 1, Cities in the Dust. No idea what that's about either. Heads up, we're about to look at Audible, and Audible shows the blurb or the beginning of the blurb in the library when you're scrolling through it, and some beginnings of blurbs to sequels of books just straight up spoil the original books. So I would advise you to unfocus your eyes or look at the thumbnails or covers of books instead of reading the descriptions. This has been your warning. There's not much else I can do about it. But that brings us, finally, to Audible. Oh, Audible, how you have sinned in recent years. I will now be doing all of my audiobook shopping elsewhere where available. It will be my last point of this isn't available anywhere else. if I can get it elsewhere, I'm getting it elsewhere. But I do have 3 pages worth of audiobooks to walk you through, and they do make up part of my digital library. So without further ado, let's begin. I decided to check out Audible for the first time with The Way of Kings, which might sound a bit extreme because it's like, it doesn't show me here, but it's like 40, 50 hours or something like that. But this is why, because I had a free trial. I remember I looked and I was like, okay, well, if every single audiobook, regardless of length, costs a single credit, and I've just been given a single credit for free, how far can I stretch this single credit in terms of content? And so I discovered Epic Fantasy. I didn't discover Epic Fantasy, but yes, I looked into Epic Fantasy because of that, and I had just finished reading the Mistborn trilogy for the first time, and so I thought, instead of continuing on to Era 2, which was already out by that point, I thought I will just take a little diversion and go check out the Stormlight Archive. And yeah, I loved it. I've recently listened to this again, by the way, but I absolutely loved it. Listened to it in probably 2018. I have very fond memories because I was also starting the job I'm still at the time. I don't necessarily love my job or anything, but I have fond memories of listening to this on the way to work and on the way home. And then, of course, Audible did the thing where I said, thanks for the free trial, I'm out. And they said, what about another credit? And I said, book 2, Lamau, let's go, which is even longer than book 1. So yeah, that happened. And I think there was then a bit of a break. Yeah, I think there was a bit of a break before I then came back and used another free trial on The Hobbit. You know how Audible are. They're desperate to get me back for 99p a month for the first 3 months, and I quit like 2 months ago. They just be like that. I'm not taking the deal. I've got integrity, damn you. But yes, The Hobbit. I listened to The Hobbit narrated by Rob Inglis, and this is something I want to mention about audiobooks. I know they're not for everyone. I have a bit of a theory that because you know how there are like visual learners and there's different kinds of learners, I think in a similar way, there are people who will take to audiobooks and people who will not take to audiobooks. And the people who won't take to audiobooks will never be able to understand the people who can take to audiobooks, because no matter how often I tell people that I can get engrossed in an audiobook and see the events happening in my mind's eye the same way I can when I'm reading a paperback book physically, people don't seem to believe me when I say that. There are people who still think, people I respect, people I like, but they will still say like, you're not taking the book in properly when you're listening to it. And so that's why I think maybe there's different kinds of brains who, some of them gel and some of them don't. That's besides the point, but yes, you should give audiobooks a go at some point, see if they're any good for you. I hear Libro.fm is pretty good. So after I finished Stormlight Archive Book 2, that was all we were up to at the time. And then obviously I tried The Hobbit. I then cast my eye back to Epic Fantasy because, again, I was trying to get the most out of each and every credit. And I discovered The Wheel of Time. Oh, The Wheel of Time, my beloved. I listened to the entirety of The Wheel of Time via audiobook, and I could not recommend it enough. Another reason why I then went to Wheel of Time after Stormlight 1 and 2 was because both of those epic fantasy series are narrated by Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, and I am telling you, they add to the experience. It is not a compromise having someone read the story to you, it is an addition to the experience. And Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, I love them so much. They are my favourite audiobook narrators. We've been through so much together and they don't even know I exist. And so yes, I listened to The Eye of the World. The Wind in the Willows, by the way, was a free book at one point that I just claimed. I've never listened to it. I don't know if I would ever like it. I know it's very fairy tale, but I thought, hey, it's free, I'll grab it. This was before they did their audio plus catalogue thing. This was free to claim. But yes, we had The Eye of the World, we listened to The Great Hunt, we listened to The Dragon Reborn, we listened to The Shadow Rising, we listened to The Fires of Heaven, we listened to Lord of Chaos, and then I started branching out because I was getting like a backlog of audiobook credits. And by the way, back-to-backing them like that does not do it justice. I took so long to read through this series. I think it was about 3.5 years in total. It might have been 2.5. I don't remember now, but yes, I have got a full review series in a playlist on this channel It does go back to my old main channel, but you can watch it all on a playlist that's linked on this channel. And I had such a great time exploring this series. But yes, then I decided to... I was like, Doctor Who, as I frequently do. I was like, I know there's a lot of Doctor Who novels. Did they ever do audiobooks of them? And I discovered, this is going back to my get what you can for a single credit mindset, that they did anthologies of Doctor Who novels. So this isn't just a Doctor Who novel, a Ninth Doctor novel. This is 3 Ninth Doctor novels. And that's actually on the conservative side, because I don't remember how many Doctor Who novels there are for Volume 2, but I know the 10th Doctor audiobooks have like 5 or 6 novels within them. So yeah, and they are narrated by like different people. So we've got Nicholas Briggs, who does the voice of the Daleks. We've got Camille Coduri, who is the actor who plays Jackie Tyler. But yeah, as you can see, we've got lots of different narrators for these ones, which is pretty fun. Then we got A Crown of Swords, Book 7 of A Wheel of Time. Then we've got World of Warcraft Sylvanas, which... I mean, I've just shown you that I'm happy to read those World of Warcraft books, right? This was such a good audio get because it's narrated by Patty Matson, who is the voice of Sylvanas, who this book is all about. So obviously when Sylvanas is talking, she's doing the Sylvanas voice, but she is just the audiobook narrator, and she does a fantastic job of narrating each and every single voice. And this is another Christie Golden World of Warcraft book, and it is up there with Arthas Rise of the Lich King for me. And that's crazy because at the point in which this came out, and even now today, to be honest, Sylvanas was a character that the player base hated and seemed irredeemable in the eyes of the player base because, like, in terms of writing, because they had taken some turns with a character that maybe weren't the best. But this actually is a really good book, and it takes her entire story and kind of weaves her lore together in as cohesive a way as possible. And again, we're going to see Sylvanas probably in Midnight coming up. So if you have not read this book, I cannot recommend it enough. You might hate Sylvanas. Read this book. You will love Sylvanas. Honestly, I'm telling you. And this book revealed that she had a brother, and we see the ghost of her brother in a dungeon that's coming up in Midnight. So it's really cool to see the lore is being referenced back here again. And I'm really excited for Christie Golden's next tie-in novel. Let's be real. It's going to be good. And then we have The Path of Daggers, The Wheel of Time, Book 8. This is when the slog really starts to kick in, by the way. If you're not familiar with the Wheel of Time slog, books 8, 9... well, some people say book 7 as well. 7, 8, 9, and 10 are kind of the slower books where not much happens. Things do happen, but it takes a long time for things to happen, and not much happens in between things happening. Oh boy. We're almost there. Power through. Winter's Heart, Wheel of Time, Book 9. Crossroads of Twilight, Book 10. And then I listened to Good Omens as a full cast production. Now, of course, Neil Gaiman... awkward. We don't love Neil Gaiman these days. He turned out to be not a great guy. But this was before that all came out, and I had a really good time listening to the full cast production of Good Omens. Anyway, How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. I wanted to branch out because I'm always reading fantasy, as you can no doubt tell at this point. And this is a very kind of sentimental book about an immortal, and I'm a sucker for immortal characters, but a guy who, well, maybe he's not immortal, but he ages extremely slowly. And what is that like? He was born, I think, in like the 1700s or the 1800s, and now he's a history teacher in modern age England. And what's it like teaching history when you've lived through it? And this guy is just plagued by the ghosts of his past, and how is he going to get past that? And it's a really touching book. I recommend it highly. So yeah, there's another slightly different one. What's next? Is it Wheel of Time? Oh no, it's Doctor Who, the 10th Doctor novels. There we go. You get 8 books in this one. Although maybe they're a bit shorter than the 9th Doctor novels, I don't know, because it does seem to add up to about the same amount of time. I forgot to mention as well with these 9th Doctor novels, the first one was The Clockwise Man, which I loved. The second one, I kind of bounced off, and that's why it says that I'm only halfway through it. The second one takes place, Rose gets abducted and she's imprisoned, and it's, again, an imprisonment plot that just kind of, we're just going to lounge with the suffering and not much really happening, and that always kind of drives me away from a story. But anyway, then we've got a bit of an odd one, Leviathan Wakes. For a hot second, I thought I might want to listen to The Expanse as an audiobook series, and I think I still might, but I did bounce off of it. Not because of the book's fault, this was more just my ADHD getting distracted with other things. But yeah, this is the only one of these I own so far. And then we've got, there we go, Knife of Dreams, book 11, Gathering Storm, book 12, Towers of Midnight, book 13, A Memory of Light, book 14. I've talked about this book before, and A Wheel of Time series as a whole, but A Memory of Light, it's just peak. It's just absolute peak. It wraps up a 14-book series as well as anyone ever could. And Robert Jordan's epic is finished, and it's complete, and it's incredible. And Brandon Sanderson did such a good job assisting with the final 3 books. And I'm so fond. I'm so fond. And then we've got more 10th Doctor novels. You know, just to give you some tonal whiplash. And look at these narrators. You've got Freema Agyeman. You've got Debbie Chesed. I don't know who that is, I'm afraid. But we've got Bernard Cribbins, Georgia Moffat. Oh, man. David Troughton. Awesome. I'm looking forward to reading those. Then, I was like, I'm going to read Lord of the Rings. I told you about this earlier, didn't I? Well, here's the redemption. I'm going to read Lord of the Rings. Bam! I did. I went, if I can read 14 books of A Wheel of Time, 3 or 4 of which are a slog, I can read Fellowship of the Ring. So I did that. And then I was like, okay, then I clearly chose to read Elantris and Warbreaker, which are, at this point, I'm going to read all of the Cosmere as well. I can do anything. I'm unstoppable. My hubris knows no bounds. And then I'm going to read The Two Towers. What's that? What's that? Someone didn't finish The Two Towers. Yeah, I got... I haven't given up on it entirely. I'll get back to it. But I just... Look. Lord of the Rings is an iconic series. It is... It's not... It's an understatement to say it's so important to the fantasy genre. It is the fantasy genre. I get that. It is also... maybe not my favourite fantasy story. And expecting it by default to be everyone's favourite fantasy story, I think, is an outdated notion at this point, because it has aged. There is brilliance here. There are times when it shines through and I can see it for the brilliant novel, the brilliant trilogy that it is, but I think there's just a few things which drive me away from it sometimes. But I will try and finish it, because I did grab The Return of the King at the same time, so hey. Oh, you can download it in part 1 and part 2. I didn't notice that. That's interesting. And then I decided, for my reread of Mistborn, I was going to read the audiobook version, because I realized it was narrated by Michael Kramer, the GOAT. And I have, not to spoil things as we continue to scroll up, but I also have... Oh, well, I mean, let's just continue. Another aside, I want to get into Warhammer. Not 40k, but just Warhammer in general. Warhammer the Old World, I think it's now called. The stuff that came before Age of Sigmar. And I was told that I could kind of skip Trollslayer, because it's kind of like shorter stories collated into one novel. But yeah, this is pulp. This is pulpy as hell, and I wanted pulpy as hell. After listening to so much Lord of the Rings, I wanted pulpy as hell, and I got it, and I had such a great time listening to pulpy as hell fantasy stories. Then I finished The Well of Ascension. Then I started Skaven Slayer, but I wasn't really in the mood for it. I realized like 15 minutes in, so that's still on my TBR. And then I finished Mistborn Book 3, so now I have read it both as an ebook format and in audio. And then I got Arcanum Unbounded, which is a curious one, because it's actually like multiple novellas from different parts of the Cosmere, as well as short stories and stuff like that. So I've been dipping in and out of this thing as needed. But the thing that's important for this is it also contains Mistborn's Secret History, which is a novella which takes place around the same time as the main series. And I won't say any more than that because of spoilers, but it's fascinating. Anyway, then I read Era 2, and Era 2 I'm so fond of. I love Mistborn Era 2. So The Alloy of Law, Mistborn Book 4, and then Shadows of Self, The Bands of Mourning and the Lost Metal. I love them so much. I was so curious about Era 2 for so long after I finished my original read-through in 2017, and to actually finally getting around to reading it and seeing how good it is as good as Era 1. If not better, I don't know, that's very controversial to say, but it is my very first taste of Flintlock fantasy, and the characters in it are exceptional. Book 4 does have a lot of Cosmere connectivity, and I think it did suffer a little bit for that in terms of just being a cohesive quadrilogy in its own right, but it was very, very good. Also, I used my Audible Plus catalog thing to listen to The War of the Worlds recently, and it's probably the last time I'm ever going to use the Plus catalog thing because now I know how much it hurts authors. And yeah, I claimed Oathbringer as well when I started listening back to The Way of Kings again, because I'm currently listening through Words of Radiance. I might need to take a break from Sanderson because I've read so much Sanderson recently that I'm not enjoying this as much as I should be and was the first time around. So I don't know. But anyway, good lord, my voice. I'm losing my voice. That is my entire digital book collection. Oh, I'm gonna stop talking. My voice legitimately hurts. I also need to go to bed. This video took a lot longer than I was expecting. It's probably the longest video out of all of them, so thank you so much if you stuck this far. Let me know in the comments anything about anything, any of the books I talked about, any of the books I need to pick up. It's just, yeah, thank you so much. Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe for more. I showed you some stuff on my TBR here. I will be reviewing them in the future, so subscribe for that, and I will catch you next time.